This is a reading from Affirmations for Self-Healing by Swami Kriyabans. And this morning the topic is on acceptance. One of the most difficult lessons in life is to learn to accept things as they are. How much energy we waste in trying to wish away the inevitable. If only this hadn't happened. If only we had reached there in time. The if-onlys and might-have-beens in life keep us from dealing realistically with what is. Acceptance comes from knowing that reality lies within ourselves and that all else is a dream. Acceptance of that one reality makes everything else acceptable. Instead of learning to come to grips with 1,000 individual challenges, therefore make the supreme effort to accept God unconditionally into your heart. Accept all that comes in life as coming from His hands. He will give you what is best for you if you live for Him alone. And let's affirm together. I accept with calm impartiality. Whatever comes my way. Free in my heart. I am not conditioned by any outer circumstance. I accept with calm impartiality. Whatever comes my way. Free in my heart. I am not conditioned by any outward circumstance. A little more quietly with deep concentration. I accept with calm impartiality. Whatever comes my way. Free in my heart. I am not conditioned by any outward circumstance. And now in a whisper, I accept with calm impartiality. Whatever comes my way. Free in my heart. I am not conditioned by any outward circumstance. And now silently to yourself with deep concentration, I accept with calm impartiality whatever comes my way. Free in my heart, I am not conditioned by any outward circumstance. I accept with calm impartiality whatever comes my way. Free in my heart, I am not conditioned by any outward circumstance. And please pray silently with me. Divine Mother, shine thy delusion cauterizing light into the hidden nooks of my heart's feelings, lest somewhere, without my conscious knowledge, I have not accepted thee. If ever I err, strengthen me to accept thy discipline, for in thy will alone lies the happiness I am seeking. Shanti.
Good morning. From Rays of the One Light Weekly Commentaries on the Bible and the Bhagavad Gita by Swami Kriyabans, entitled, In Surrender Lies Victory. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. A case might be made for surrender as a path to victory in worldly conflicts. The way of passive resistance, for example, in preference to armed resistance. But our point here concerns a higher kind of surrender, the surrender of our deluded, egoic will to the wise and almighty will of God. Human will is, as Paramahansa Yogananda used to say, guided by whims and limited understanding. The divine will is in harmony with every level of reality. Though the divine will sometimes appears to us at first to be wrong, it proves always eventually to be for our own highest good. Human will is inconsistent. It leads us one day to success and another to disaster. The divine will, when we surrender to it completely, though it's not always easy to do so, always brings us deep inner peace and joy in the end. Jesus Christ demonstrated this perfect surrender to God's will in the Garden of Gethsemane, the night before he was captured and imprisoned, preparatory for his crucifixion. He went apart from the others to pray and asked them to pray also. But when he returned to them, he found them asleep. Out of his love for them, he excused them, saying, "The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak." He then urged them again, saying, "Watch and pray." Their weakness in those circumstances was particularly sad, and the disciples themselves must have regretted it bitterly later on. We all know the symptoms of human weakness, though we may excuse them in ourselves, saying, "Well, after all, I'm only human." But what are the signs of true strength? We find in all cases that these are the fruits of a life wholly surrendered to God. The Bhagavad Gita lists these signs in the 13th chapter. Humbleness, truthfulness, and harmlessness, patience and honor, reverence for the wise, purity, constancy, control of self, contempt for sense delights, self-sacrifice, perception of the certainty of ill in birth, old age and frail mortality, disease, the ego's suffering and sin, detachment, lightly holding thoughts of home, children and wife, those ties which bind most men, an ever tranquil heart, heedless of good, or adverse fortune, with a will upraised to worship me alone unceasingly, loving deep solitude and shunning noise of foolish crowds, calm focus on the self, perceived within and in infinity. These qualities reveal true wisdom, Prince, and all that is otherwise is ignorance. And from Whispers from Eternity by Paramahansa Yogananda, entitled, "O Divine Heart, I will hunt for thee in the forest of my soul. O Divine Heart, I ran after thee equipped with the spears of selfish desire. Thou dost fly before me. I raced after thee shouting prayers loudly, but my voice drove thee from me by the gusts of my restlessness. The noise I made only frightened thee away. Stealthily then, I crept up to thee and cast the dart of my concentration. Alas, my hand unsteadily shook, and thou didst bound away. As thou didst so, however, thy hoofs echoed. Without devotion thou art a poor, poor marksman. With firm devotion then, holding fast the dart of meditation, I crept forward. Thy divine hoofbeats came stealing back, but I heard thee whisper, I am beyond thy mental dart, far beyond. At last, despairingly, I entered the cave of celestial love, and there at last, lo, thou, the divine heart, camest willingly into my heart. And this last reading is a real precious one because, of course, here we are, bless you, on the spiritual path because we need support. We need reassurance, and we need it all the time because the Maya is also reassuring us. Come, I know that you didn't enjoy that movie, but the ice cream after the movie will be very nice. I know you ate too much ice cream and it was too late at night, but in the morning, pancakes. And on and on and on it goes. And so for most people, the world is their guru. But it always leads to a dead end. It always leads with disillusionment. But when we do our best, as of course we all are, to follow the will of God from within, from our own soul, then we find that though it's difficult, and sometimes we feel like God is just throwing thorns down on our path, gleefully even, and yet, again, Divine Mother has the right, as the Gurus have always said, to test us, to test our love. Divine Mother said to Yogananda at one point, she said, in the beginning, when he first started his work in 1920, there in America, he said, well, in the beginning, I was sending you a lot of difficult cases, but now I'm sending you only angels. And so we have to be prepared for this. So this is a letter of incredible reassurance written by Yogananda that he put in his East-West magazine back in 1933. To my friends, in all lands and in all worlds, greetings and goodwill. Wherever you are, whoever you are, and whatever color, race, or creed, I send you my love and the pledge of my loyalty. You, who for thousands of years, or for only a day, have worked and fought for justice, freedom, and truth, receive my gratitude and devotion. You who dwell in palaces or hovels, in cities or jungles, in mansions or dungeons, if in your hearts there is the urge to go higher, if in your heart there is the urge toward higher, better living and loftier ideals, believe me when I say I am your friend, and that I count you blessed friends of mine. Many of you I have known in the past, and some of you I have never seen, but I think that in God's appointed time I shall meet each one of you face to face and give you proof of my affection. However, it matters little that we are not together now, nor does it matter that time and space may separate us by almost infinite distances. The only thing that counts is that we are friends, working together in a common cause, the cause of righteousness and the expansion of the consciousness of the children of the Most High. Although I see you not, I often feel your presence near, or thrill with the noble thoughts which you send out to find their home in minds attuned to yours. Although you may never read the words which I am penning now, I declare to you that you will feel the vibrations of tenderness and kindliness which emanate from me to all of you. Our work, our love, our purposes are one. March on, dear friends, to higher, brighter goals. Continue in your dreams of happier days and in your deeds of service to your kind. Protect the torch of faith from winds of doubt, and let no storm disturb your peace of mind. Farewell, dear friends of mine, until we meet. That kind of reassurance for us is absolutely essential. It's hard to get through a reading such as that. If again, as he said, if I have never met in God's appointed time, then we will meet. And of course, these gurus being omnipresent, we know that that Master was sharing is to comfort us on a human level, because on a divine level, at this point of our evolution, we know that God is always with us. And as we test that amidst times of real trial, we find that He is always there, and even more so when those trials come. There's a beautiful story of this man who met Yogananda many, many years ago, I believe perhaps in Boston, in the 20s. And he attended a lecture that was attended by thousands, as was the case during those times, the 20s and 30s, when Master was filling the largest halls in the land. And then this man lost touch with Yogananda for about 25 years. He searched here and there, but he didn't know where he was. He had Master had established his headquarters in Los Angeles in 1925. The man had lost track of him. But what was his good karma? Decades later, then he found out where Yogananda was and made a beeline for his ashram there in Los Angeles, who Yogananda called Los Angeles the Benares of the West. And so when this man had a personal interview with Yogananda, he said, many years ago, I attended your lecture. And throughout that lecture, I was so amazed. You seem to be talking exclusively to me. And Master says, I remember. And Swami Kriyananda would say that he too had these kinds of similar experiences where he would have some question in his mind. And Yogananda, in the middle of a public lecture, would look at him, answer his question, and then go on. This is why these great ones are so vital for us. And when Divine Mother disciplines us, again, sometimes it's harsh, as Yogananda said, but always with loving purpose. And we have to remember that. It's very, very important. Always with loving purpose. How could it be otherwise? When God is love, how could God administer a blow that wasn't with love, even though it's painful? But Yogananda said, every time I have to discipline others, I just wilt. Because, as he said, Divine Mother has given me too much love. And so with that kind of love, of course, when there was the need to discipline, of course there was. There was one time, which I shared before, quite extraordinary, where in the early years, again, Divine Mother was testing him there as he was establishing his work in Los Angeles. And it was just one person after another causing so much turmoil and so much trouble. Finally, Yogananda had to leave his own international headquarters and rent a place in nearby Santa Monica by the beach there in Los Angeles. And he said, Divine Mother, chop off all their heads. Well, he didn't want them to die, obviously, but he did want them to leave. And when he got back, the whole place was empty. And he said, then peace reigned. And so there are those times when the discipline is required. But we don't want to be dwelling on that. We want to be thinking more in terms, I think we talked about this last week, where at one point we are filled enough with joy, which is of course the fruit of meditation and the fruit of seva, that we really don't pay that much attention to these tests that come. As when Swami Kriyananda was told one time by a friend, outlining this incredibly turbulent year, he said, oh my! He was surprised that there had been all of these tremendous trials and obstacles because he hadn't related to them as something personal. It was just, he was going through this experience, as he said, Kriyananda is an event that I'm responsible for. And so as we detach ourselves, which is so very important, I mean, it is the spiritual path to in time, as Yogananda said, I killed Yogananda long ago. No one dwells in this temple now but God. Our job, and we can't miss the point, when we do, we have to remember again that it is to demolish the ego. That's all. We've got to get rid of this little Napoleon that's always running around and it cares not about anything other than claiming credit for itself. Little things. I made that samosa. I built that building. On and on it goes. It couldn't care less from the most minute, silliest details. It wants to blow its horn and tell the entire world, broadcast everywhere, I did this. One time I saw a movie I really enjoyed. It was a sports movie. Roma and I like sports. And it was a basketball movie. And these guys had big egos there on the court. And he wanted there to be teamwork. And all they cared about is how many points did they score. And could they finally find themselves on the record board and so forth. And so at one time, because it had gotten so outrageous, they were all showboating. I don't know if you have that term here in India, but we certainly have that in America, where these guys, one after another, these outrageous hook shots and all the things they could do and just, beating their breasts with how great they were. So finally the coach thought it had gotten too out of hand. And he had to do something absolutely absurd that would shock them. So he went down and he began tying his shoes that had become unlaced. And then he stood up and he said, I tied my shoes. That's something I did. I tied my shoes. Oh my God, look at how I tied my shoes. Everybody, because sometimes God has to make it so extreme. And then the team began to play as one. That's all that he wanted. He didn't want to go to that silly length of doing such a stupid thing as this. I tied my shoes. But really, when we claim anything, it's just as idiotic as that. Because we're caught again. And so that's why God knows, and again it says in the Gita, get away from my ocean of suffering and misery. And we can get confused, because why would he say that? Why doesn't he just dissolve the Maya and bring us all back to him? Well, we'll find out later. Some of these things have to be suspended. Otherwise, it causes us pain and confusion. You try to have everything answered where we're not on that level yet. That's where faith comes in. That's where we have to cling on to the feet of the gurus. They know. And I often think, and I find this very helpful, that if I ever have a question and it's gnawing at me, it could be some kind of solution I need outwardly. It might be some kind of conflict inwardly. I know that right now, God and gurus could completely satisfy, even in minute detail. The reason for this is that 10 incarnations ago, you were a thief. And so now, because it all adds up to zero, as the yogis say, now you have to pay out that karma. And so the reason that you're struggling in this way is from that previous incarnation. So, as Yogananda recommended, meet each test pleasantly, but claim responsibility. The world doesn't like to claim responsibility. It likes to cover its back. That's all it ever cares about. And so, I think that you're late again for the third day at work. Oh, no. The thing is that my clock, I just got back from the States, and, there's a 12-hour difference and so on. And so it will never happen again and so forth. Anything we can think of. Whereas, rather, we should say, well, okay, this is the third time. This is it. And we lock our will and we choose to then be prompt. And we choose then to be punctual. We have to be very, very careful. Very, very careful on the spiritual path. Because all of us have had over the incarnations, we've gained skills. That's why Yogananda said we're so skillful in our ignorance. We've gained skills in continuing to stay in this silly mud pile. Because it's not very comfortable, but at least it's familiar. That's the odd thing about human nature. We do these outrageous things, smoke cigars. I don't think anyone smokes cigars here, but if you do, try to give up that habit. All of these things, eat food that's really not the best for us. Again, when I see you Indians in McDonald's, I want to go in there, which I would never do, and say, run for your life. There's no food in here. It's all a disguise. A complete disguise. Tastes good. Those milkshakes and those veggie burgers and all that stuff, they taste good, but there's no food value there. Go where there is real food. Go to the farmer's market. Go to 9th Block and see that wonderful array of lovely vegetables and fruits and so on. And so after a while, and it takes spiritual maturity, which usually is the fruit of incarnations of suffering, not to mention this one, we finally resolve to do all that we can to stay aware. Remember, if you want to be happy, make good choices. Every moment's a crossroads. And so it's very, very important that we stay aware, because otherwise we, being so skillful in our ignorance, are fabulous at procrastinating. And we're fabulous at just being restless. You know what I've been thinking lately about the thoughts in my mind? It's been very helpful. I've been thinking this. I love images. We have found the treasure. It's inside. We found it. And that takes, again, as Yogananda said, even to want to know God takes very, very, very good karma. Well, God's within. The Guru resides in our heart. So now we've found the treasure. Now we have found the gold mine. A gold mine that is far beyond anything that this world could offer. But though we found it, there's a lot of work that's needed. Ask any person who was out there in the desert digging for gold. Even when they found the gold mine, a lot of effort is required. And meanwhile, in this image, I'm digging away, but there's hailstorms, and there's scorching sun, and there's insects and bugs and all these things. And I just think, well, I finally found the gold mine. Would you just, get the rest of the stuff away? But what did Master say to Swami when they were preparing, I should say, for the dedication of Lake Shrine, as Master called the showcase of his work? And there were all these gnats. And the vibration was just fabulous and so beautiful, but all these gnats. And so Swami came to Yogananda and says, why, in such a beautiful place, are these nuisances here? And Master smiles sweetly. He says, well, that's God's way of always moving us along. That's all. Always pushing us toward the goal. Always giving us every incentive, although they irritate us. There's this amazing story, if you ever have a chance to read the story of Corrie ten Boom. She and her sister, father and family were there, persecuted by the Nazis, thrown in the camps. Her father and sister died there. Her sister Betsy was a true saint. And so Corrie relates this story where they were in this particular cell with lots of people, very overcrowded, extremely poor food, if you could even call it that. And on top of it, there were all these fleas. And Corrie was astonished when her sister Betsy said, these fleas are a blessing. And she thought, I don't really understand my sister that well. Again, because of her high level of consciousness, perhaps she would say things like that from time to time. But this one is totally unacceptable because they couldn't even sleep at night. And then at work, then when they were then needing to go to work, they were doing all of this hard labor, eating so poorly, and then without sleep. So she said to Betsy, some of the things that you say, of course, I understand, but this one I cannot. Tell me. Well, she said, it's very easy. The guards would not allow us to have, which they would have every day, perhaps many times a day, Bible readings and prayer and meditation. The guards would come in and disrupt us and perhaps beat us and so forth. But they know that this place has fleas, so they don't come in, so that we can worship uninterruptedly. And so Corrie was taught a lesson that she could hardly believe, that the fleas were good. Fleas are good? How could this be? But they allowed then these high souls, and there were so many saints that came out of the concentration camps, because it was so extreme, then they had to, those that had that very good karma, to rise to the heights. And so the book is called The Hiding Place. There's a movie too. If you ever have a chance, it's really good. And of course, everything's on YouTube. Isn't that handy? So you can go find it. It's an incredible story, an incredible true story of those souls that were able to rise to the occasion. And to finish on this theme, after they got out, and I think it was, Corrie may have been the only one of the family, she was tested to the point that I don't know how many could have been victorious in this test. The guard showed up, and of course now the guards were being hunted because the Allies had taken over, and now those that had sided again with, for instance, this was in Holland, sided with the police department and so forth, and basically were part of the enemy. They, of course, didn't want to go to prison and so forth. Then they were hunted, and the prisoner and of course, those that were the Nazis were hunted and so forth. And so one of these soldiers came and knocked at the door of her home. She was now back in Holland, in her childhood home. And she was stunned to see this was the guard who killed her family. And he had changed. And he had found Christ. He had found God. And so he knew that she was there. And he was, of course, begging for forgiveness. And so he extended his hand and said, "Will you forgive me?" And she couldn't extend her hand. It was impossible. How could she? This man had killed her family and ruined her life. And what was the miracle? When she felt the energy of Christ flowing through her body, her arm was extended and she shook this man's hand, this murderer's hand, and they were both healed. And so for us, there's those extreme stories, and there's these many little instances where God gives us, and really it's continuous, these reassurances to continue to remain steadfast on the path. Yogananda said, not for sticking it out. No, not for sticking it out, for the love of God. So that every single day, to the extent that we can, we put aside our desires and we put aside all of these issues that are troubling us. And I'm remembering my earlier point about meditation with all the thoughts now. I'm considering them now really as swirling around karma. Karma manifests in all these different ways. And so it's just karma swirling around. So there I am digging my gold mine, and if I'm not thinking of the image of sleet and snow and bugs, it's just these thoughts, which of course we're always having to deal with in meditation. And it's just karma. And we need to outwit our karma. How do we do that? By going deep. Every meditation needs to be deeper than the last. And all we need to do, and all it takes is humility, is to pray to God and the great ones to help us to overcome this tendency to be restless, to overcome this tendency to be self-involved, to give us this driving force that it's only for God alone. And so the reassurances from this beautiful letter and in the many things that come to us, how many could handle the onslaught of our karma and all the things that happen in this world without God constantly throwing down the breadcrumbs and saying, just follow those breadcrumbs. They will lead you back into the light. Just do that. Keep your life simple. Follow the inspiration from within. Do those things that will help you to grow spiritually. What did Lahiri Mahashaya say? And I'll conclude with this. It's enough. Making, someday made. So